Hey, all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie, and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book is called Wanted, Toddler's Personal Assistant. How the Nannying for the 1% Taught Me About the Myths of Equality, Motherhood, and Upward Mobility in America by Stephanie Kiser. And yes, that was quite the mouthful of a title. This was a New York book I deliberately chose. I was optimistic about the memoir, even though I worried at the lengthy subtitle. If Kiser were a student of mine, I would have asked her, are you sure you're going to be able to adequately develop all these huge social issues throughout your narrative? And she would have nodded like all my students do, and I would have asked again, but that's going to be a lot to cover. As ambitious as the subtitle is, the book didn't quite deliver. However, that doesn't mean I didn't like the book. Kiser, as you have probably already guessed, becomes a nanny for disgustingly rich people in New York. Kiser herself grew up in a relatively poor family, which she uses as comparisons throughout the book. While her toddlers are wearing dresses worth thousands of dollars and eating fancy schmancy food and going on exotic vacations, Kiser, well, did not as a child. The bulk of the book describes Kiser's three main nannying positions, two of which are positive experiences with pleasant moms whose richness have not annihilated their social awareness, and with toddlers and babies she bonds with. Throughout her experiences, Kiser uses flashbacks to describe her own childhood and education. Sometimes these flashbacks are well-placed and significant. Other times, I really don't know why they are there. For instance, there's this lengthy story of her pooping her pants in a pool, which seemed like a waste of space. Kiser's best friend, Lila, also factors into the story. Lila was her rich friend who Kiser befriended after a basketball scholarship got her into a hoity-toity high school. This friendship also provides more juxtaposition as Kiser compares Lila's wealthy upbringing to her own more impoverished one. They share an apartment in New York, but then Kiser gets an abortion, doesn't deal well with the emotional fallout of that, and then they aren't friends anymore. You might be asking what all of this has to do with nannying. Good question. That's the main problem with the book. Despite its ambitious subtitle, which doesn't really deliver on such issues, Kiser gets caught up in her own story, which is fine. It is a memoir, but some of the side plots that are happening just don't seem to fit, especially with the title the way it is. The title leads you to believe that Kiser is going to prove some significant social insights as she is nannying, but then spends quite a bit of time on the book on issues that have little to do with it, like her life before nannying. And when she does bring up such issues, she announces them, many of which don't get more than a paragraph or two. Here's an example of how she does this in regards to the idea of parenting. Most Upper East Siders choose to put their wealth to good use and avoid the nuisance of sleepless nights. They hire a baby nurse, a woman whose sole purpose is to tend to the newborn's every need, day or night. Baby nurses work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A mother with a baby nurse will never need to change a diaper, clean a circumcision, or ease their baby's tummy problems. The cost of this service is high. An experienced or certified baby nurse in New York City can put you out $1,000 a day. Of course, Sasha's family could easily afford it. To them, the cost would hardly register, but Sasha loves motherhood. She never offloads her responsibilities as a mother, not even in the rawest, most difficult moments. I respect her for that, but I also really don't get it. I think about what motherhood feels like for women who cannot afford nannies or baby nurses, housekeepers, or tutors. If being a mom is this challenging for Sasha, whose wealth and resources far exceed the majority of Americans, what is it like for a teen or single mother? Even I, clocking an average only 9 hours a day with the children, leave their house exhausted. How are moms with no partner, no financial resources, and no support managing such a heavy workload? It occurs to me that if I'd like an answer, I should start by asking my mother. This is how she deals with issues throughout the book, even ones regarding race, how mothers are always doing more parenting than fathers, etc. Kiser gives you one little example, following up with some pronouncement about the social issue at hand. That narrative choice made it feel somewhat juvenile at times. Kiser is nannying during COVID, so we do get to peek into how the very wealthy just use more money to throw extravagant get-togethers to make it feel like a vacation. Many nannies lost their job. Kiser even tells us that many never received benefits or unemployment because they were paid under the table. I don't know if that meant their employers chose to do that so they didn't have to pay taxes or something, or if the nannies were not legally in the country. Kiser really doesn't tell us. But she does spend an exorbitant amount of time on politics in the later part of the book, which I could have done without. Part of this feels legitimate to the story since Kiser is comparing her own sheltered childhood with what she is learning from being around the people she nannies for. I am rather shocked at what Kiser doesn't know, especially since she went to a preppy, reputable high school. Kiser admits to not being a very good student, but still, to come out of college, and she reminds us often of her student loan debt, and still not know some of this stuff. Like she didn't know who the vice president was. I mean, these are basic things. Those kinds of moments just torment me. By the time you're an adult in college, yes, your family environment has shaped you, but you didn't figure this out when you went to college, at least a little bit. Sure, our educational system is failing miserably, but once we're adults, aren't we responsible for what we learn? I don't know. Those parts were really tough for me to read. And then she gets political in a few chapters, which I cannot stand to read anything about any politics right now, no matter what side you're on. My favorite parts in the book were when she was realizing stuff about parenthood. And as a mother myself, I appreciated these little insights, especially since Kiser is not a mother, but a nanny. It's been 2.5 years since Sasha brought home a newborn for me to care for, and perhaps, like with all new things, the fear disappeared with time. I imagine this feeling isn't so different from that of a new mother. The first child seems so dependent and fragile that it's hard to believe there will ever be anything other than terrifying. Then comes a second child and maybe a third, and suddenly you have this acute understanding that it is unlikely you will kill the children. In fact, it's far more likely that the children are going to kill you. And she has these little funny insights throughout, which I appreciated. Even though Kiser's not a mother, she learns a lot about unconditional love, negotiating with stubborn children, and navigating the feelings of worthlessness, even though mothers and nannies are doing the most important job on earth, yet get zero thanks for it. She feels less than her friend because she isn't climbing the corporate ladder, going out to lunch at fancy restaurants, or even wearing professional work clothes. Very relatable to every mom out there. Kiser quits nannying and somehow lands a job as an executive assistant, which I wish she would have developed just a little bit more because essentially really rich men act like toddlers. Their requests and behavior are just as insane as a 2-year-old's. Kiser's book would have been more appropriate for a young adult audience since she even has that kind of writing style. I don't care for YA literature, even though I teach high school. I research and take my students' opinions on fiction. I read classics and nonfiction. Kiser's book would be great for a teenager or college student. They would probably learn a lot from her book. I didn't really, which was kind of disappointing. I thought the book would focus on nannying and all the weird stuff that rich people do. There are a few tidbits in the book, but not much. The book tries to accomplish way too much, as I feared with the lengthy subtitle. Add into that Kiser's background and her own storylines, and the societal issues that the subtitle promises just get lost. They are essentially reduced to a paragraph here or there throughout the book, and that's about it. I was hoping to read multiple instances to prove such points, not just that one mom only spoke to white nannies or one dad was rude to the help, reserving smaller stakes for the nannies. And if Kiser herself didn't experience such things, I was hoping she would share the wisdom of other nannies who have been doing this job for decades. But not really. A little bit she does. If you read or watched the movie The Help, Wanted, Toddler's personal assistant won't really reveal much more of the insane behavior of rich people, except The Help did a beautiful job showing the attachment of the children with the nanny. That's where Kiser could have done a much better job in her book. She touches upon it, this bond, but doesn't really deal with that bond and what happens when it breaks. You wonder how much the children are affected by it too. Wanted, Toddler's personal assistant was a quick read and didn't really challenge my thinking much, but I would highly recommend it to Gen Z. It had so much potential, but just didn't achieve what the subtitle stated. Younger generations might learn a few things about motherhood, about money can't buying happiness, and about the stuff they never think much about or obviously didn't learn at school or in college. Thanks for watching. As always, my job at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.